Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald in Quincy at the Quincy Museum, where they're celebrating their 50th anniversary. Now, not all 50 years of the museum have been in this building. They started at the Indian Mounds Park and then went down to Quincy Island. But back in 1980, they got a look at this building and they wanted it, and they made it work.
Barbara, 50 years, and you've only been here 11. You must feel like a newcomer, huh?
I do indeed. Yes, absolutely.
You thought, you and the board thought, well, you know, in commemoration of 50 years, why don't we go through the collection and go through our memory banks and think of what the most popular exhibits were through those 50 years and reproduce those again?
Yes, we thought that would be a great way to celebrate our 50th, and hopefully a little bit of a way to get some things out of the collection and show them off again.
Yeah.
Some things that hadn't been seen in a while.
Yeah, maybe some of the greatest hits.
Yes,
from the Quincy
pretty
Museum,
much the greatest hits. That's a good.
You know, when it first started, it wasn't called the Quincy Museum. This sort of morphed, didn't it? We're looking at a building up there that was actually in the old Indian Mounds Park.
Yes, we started as the Cherokee Indian Museum, and that building was built in Indian Mounds Park over an excavated Indian mound.
And the man involved in that, now Dr. Reed here was a dentist, but he was also an archaeologist, wasn't he? Or
yes, he was. He'd been a
self-trained.
lifelong amateur archaeologist, and he got permission in about 1962 to excavate one of the Indian mounds in Indian Mounds Park. And it happened to be a burial mound, and so he also then got permission to build a building over the top of the excavated mound and open it for tourists.
And so what tourists were seeing was they were seeing the mound as it looked after it had been sort of cross-sectioned, and there were some bones in there too, weren't there?
Yes, at that time it was very popular to show the excavation as it would have been done by the archaeologists.
Yeah, and then that became offensive to some folks, because I remember Dixon Mounds had an exhibit like that where they had an exposed mound, and they finally had to close it. It was just too controversial.
And when the Cherokee Indian Museum closed, the human remains were reburied, and there was a big ceremony with Native Americans that were here and shamans, and they had a very nice ceremony when they closed things back up.
It's interesting. Okay, then the museum moves, and through all this time, it has this sort of connection with the explorers, with a local explorers group. So there are Boy Scouts learning all about this as they go and helping out with the thing, weren't they?
Yes, the first people that operated the museum was Explorer Post 107, and the Explorer Post members, they ran the gift shop, they gave tours, they maintained the museum, they did a lot of the building of the museum, retaining walls, different things like that. And they were, again, the very first tour guides, and they used that as an opportunity to earn money and points to get them to Philmont and other scout locations.
Now this generation, we're looking at the building that the Park District built on Quincy Island. It's still called the Quincy Indian Museum at this point.
It is. They moved there in they opened in 1971 on Quincy Island, and that was part of the big development that was ongoing there at the time. They had the sky ride that took you across from Hampshire Street. They had the Quincy Queen boat that took you across. They had the Little Q Railroad, and then they had another little railroad that took you across to Quincy Island. And there were the log cabins there, and there was, of course, all the boat slips and the Quincy Indian Museum.
Yeah. Well, one of the problems was, though, since there weren't any cars allowed on Quincy Island, once those other modes of transportation ran into problems, couldn't get out there.
Right, and so at that point, that's when the museum board decided to look for a location in town.
Now, we're looking at a fellow here on the upper left, Bob Mays. He was instrumental, wasn't he?
He was indeed. Bob Mays was our longest serving board member. From when he passed away in 2011, he'd been on our board for 46 years.
Wow.
Bob was there from the very beginning. So when we moved here to town, he helped us get this building. And at the time, the board, just to tell you how dedicated these people were, the board had about $68 in their treasury when they decided to take on the mission of purchasing this building for the Quincy Museum. So they were way more optimistic than a lot of people would be today.
Yeah, we'll hear Bob's name again as we go through the program, because he was a fireball. Now, okay, now we're on Main Street in the Stillwell, was it Newton Stillwell? What's the Newcomb Stillwell
Newcomb Stillwell.
Mansion, one of the great grand buildings of Quincy. And this is some of the artwork, and these are some of the leftovers of some of the work that was done when you actually had to bring it back, huh?
Yep. In 1980, the board took a one-year lease with an option to buy, and they started the work of restoring the museum. They worked on the building pretty much one room at a time.
Wow.
And in a lot of cases, they had to tear down plaster and replace with drywall or with plaster. They had to do rewiring. They installed an air conditioning system eventually and an elevator.
Now, Dr. and Mrs. Snow, Ardith Snow, she was instrumental in this too, wasn't she?
She was indeed. John Snow was our very first curator, and he also was involved in the museum from the time that it was the Cherokee Indian Museum. And his wife, Ardith, was a wonderful artist, and she not only recreated these pieces that you see in the case, these are all reproductions of the stenciling and the murals that were on the ceilings and walls here in the building.
So they found out what was here and then they reproduced it, and she did that herself.
She did indeed. Wow. She went ahead and painted it so that we would have a record of what things looked like in case we ever wanted to completely restore it back to the original.
Wow. Now she also did portraits.
She did indeed. She was a very accomplished artist.
And you mentioned this fellow to me earlier, and I can't remember his significance, but he was a big help, wasn't he?
He certainly was. This is Byron Knobloch, and the portrait is by Ardith Snow. And Byron was our first president of the museum, and eventually he became our president emeritus and librarian for the museum.
Oh, okay. Okay, well she's quite talented. And then there is, of course, the building itself. This is another one of Ardith Snow's works. And she could have made a very good living doing portraits of people's houses.
Absolutely. This is a wonderful piece that normally lives in our gift shop. But we brought it out here and put it on display for this exhibit, partially in honor of Ardith.
People who live in Quincy, of course, know this. They drive by this all the time. But our viewers who are not in Quincy, it's worth a trip to Quincy just to come see this building.
Well,
and of course, take a tour of the museum itself. But it is remarkable, isn't it? You like coming to work here every day?
I love coming to work here every day. I'm the luckiest person in the world to get to work in a place like this every day.
It is beautiful. Well, there was a time, I guess, when you guys had a big exhibit out called Treasures of the Orient. And enough of this is in your permanent collection that you're able to put really stunning stuff out again. And I'll tell you, the Chinese, it's just remarkable work, isn't it?
They are truly, truly artisans. There's a lot of wonderful, wonderful jade carvings in this case, and ivory in different pieces.
These two discs that we see here, which are just, I've never, of course I'm not a student of this, but I've never seen this before. And look at the carvings. They're not identical. They're very different. But they symbolize something, don't they?
They do. They symbolize the celestial universe, and the hole in the center symbolizes the opening to eternal life. Some people call the hole in the center the ear to heaven, and they believe that the dead could speak to their descendants through the hole in the disc.
Oh, be darned. And then as we go through the line here, I think we've seen see this clay horse here that we see here. We've heard that in the news recently.
We have indeed. This is from a smaller series of tombs near the Wye and the Yellow Rivers, but they're very similar to the clay army that is the larger scale one that has been excavated. And this one dates to the Tang Dynasty.
Wow.
And so
600 to 900 AD.
Very, very old.
Yeah.
And in beautiful condition.
Now, not nearly that old, but a lot more fun is the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus. And this was really a neat exhibit because not only did you have all the circus stuff going on, and kids and adults love this, but this is locally made, most of it, isn't it?
It is indeed. A Quincy gentleman named Milton Calmer, he built this, he and his wife. It took them about 15 years to develop the circus. And they hand-carved these figures that you see.
We're looking at the band right now. Look at that band.
Isn't it awesome? You can even see the puffy cheeks on the tuba player.
You can. I hadn't even noticed it. Oh, boy.
So they built the wagons. There are about 15 wagons in the set, and all of the sideshow, they painted the sideshow signs and everything to go along with their depictions of the various sideshow performers. And this at one time was a large enough exhibit. It includes tents and everything from the dining tent to, of course, the blacksmith's wagon you see here. And it took up a whole room. Some of these things were motorized at one time, so the trapeze artists swung back and forth.
All of the humans figures that you see here, they were all made by the Calmers, right?
They were all hand carved.
Wow. I think we're looking right at the lion tamer right now. Look at him. And then just to his right, the sword swallower. and then the fortune teller to his right.
They were so imaginative. They built the ticket booths that you see there. There's actually little tiny tickets on those spools.
There are.
Tickets.
And then down in the very center, we see this picture of Avril Marie Burnson, who we're going to hear from later in this program.
Yes.
What did she have to do with this?
Well, Avril Marie was, not only has she been on our board since 1980, she was our first female president, and she was instrumental in getting the Calmer Brothers Circus donated to the museum.
So it's yours now, and it's donated to you. You don't have to return it. It's
No,
yours.
we don't. It's been ours for a long, long time, and we're privileged to be able to bring it out occasionally.
Do you know one nice thing about being on staff at a museum is it like if you can dream up an exhibit, you also get to make it.
Yes.
Or you have to make it. I'm sorry, that's not in the budget. You'll just have to make that.
That's what we do.
Well, for the Paleozoic era exhibit that y'all did during the past 50 years and brought back for this exhibit, that's exactly what you did. You and your husband and son made this stuff,
Yes, we
didn't you?
did, yeah, because you just can't find this. In fact, we went over to, I have to give Springfield the credit for this. They had done an Ancient Seas one, and we went over there to get ideas, and I thought, well, I can come home and I can make those things too. And so going into my husband's workshop and getting them involved, they came up with a lot of this stuff, the crinoids and the...
Well, point out a crinoid
The
to me.
crinoids are these long stem things, and these are actually animals.
They are?
Yes. You look at them as plants now, but they actually have like little hands or feet on the bottom
Under
here.
the sand? Really?
And then they can move. You can see kind of one right there, the dead one there that's kind of, it's got a little point on it there, and they can move around.
Now, this would have been in an inland sea that covered the area of Quincy. Okay, in the Paleozoic era. Now, what are these shells down here?
These are brachiopods, and these are actual from, I did a cast and a mold and made these, and they have little feelers, I call them little tongues that they can move around. That one that's standing up like that, that's ready to move.
It looks like he's on a leg, but he's really like on a tongue, and he's going to get okay.
And he'll move around from place to place.
So that kind of anchors them in the sand, but when they want to move, they can, huh?
Yes.
Wow.
And the only thing that is really a fossil here is our coral here, this colony coral. That's found in this area. And all the other corals that you see here are the actual fossils, and the rest of them are reproductions. And the Archimedes screw here, the fan one.
Okay, the fan,
And then this one down here is like a dead part of it, the middle of it that had died out.
Okay.
And then we have some like little figures here, the trilobites. They're just little rubber reproductions.
You didn't
that
make those.
No,
You're not taking credit for those.
No.
While we're in this window, let's look at the backdrop, because we've mentioned Artist Snow before, and she painted this, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
Beautiful work.
She did a lot of paintings just on the back of our cases, but luckily she did this one on a board that we could save. And we wish she'd have done a lot of other ones, because then we would just come and paint over her paintings. And
no! Now you can take the board out and save it.
And this is practically the only one, except some of the things that she's done for the.
Oh, that's too bad.
For the our 50th anniversary.
Now, I didn't want to look at this exhibit until you told me that you went to school at this one-room schoolhouse.
Yes.
I thought, we got to do that. And the schoolhouse that you were in as a student is right there. It was called the Standard School, District Number 152. And it was I guess it was on the east side of Quincy, huh? Or where Quincy is now, or was it out of town?
No, it was out of town. It was a country school. It was our neighborhood school. My grandfather and uncle lived up the road, and we walked to school. And my children loved to tell their friends that their mother went to a one-room schoolhouse, and they'd say, well, how old is she? But I was the last of that generation. I 3 generations went to, not this one's school, but there was 2 other ones that replaced Standard. And
Okay,
old.
those were the older schools.
Yeah, my grandfather and my dad, they went to school there, and then I did too.
And then they built a new school for you, and then somebody burned it down.
Yes,
in the process.
it was on Mother's Day too. The museum had wanted to use that and restore it, and because there were a lot of teachers here in Quincy who wanted to teach in a one-room school to let the kids really understand what it was like to be there.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people are saving those now. They've restored them and they save them now, and it's a very good thing.
It is. Well, it was one of my happiest times because it was the neighborhood. You didn't have to go very far to school, and you knew everybody. There was only 3 kids in my class, and so it was just
3
fun.
Kids. I'll bet you kids find this interesting, but they also find this
they like
interesting
it.
over
They
here.
they can't understand that just 3 kids in your class.
No, I can't. That's really small for me too, because when I tour one-room schoolhouses around Central Illinois, usually 15 to 20 kids.
Well, there was 15 to 20 in the whole.
But in your grade.
But in my
huh?
grade,
Yeah.
there was only 3 of us, and so that was fun. Yeah, this case is kind of like then and now, and I like to tell when kids come through here, you know, you think of the telephone. Well, you know, you have the cell phones, the Blackberries, and all those. Well, look how they started out, and I kind of remember when we had those, but I do remember that we had 2 rings was us, and then you picked it up. You had to let it ring for about 4 or 5 times because you was on a party line.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And kids don't understand
People
that.
they have never heard party line. They
No.
think it sounds like fun.
Yeah.
That wasn't fun.
No, because especially if you got a neighbor that wouldn't get off the phone when you
Exactly.
wanted to talk.
That's right.
But you know, and then I like some of the things how vanilla, you know, your spices, your boxes have changed, your magazines, the covers of them had changed, and
Look at how milk used to come, and then now we get it in these plastic.
yes, and I love the milk in the glass. It's so much colder in the glass, and your mixers and well, just like even take your clothespins, how they've changed.
For some kids, they wouldn't even recognize these.
No. Well, and your Pepsi back there, look at it, you know, from a bottle to a can, and then Flynn was, I believe, was bottled here in Quincy, I think.
Avril Marie Burnson, 50. You've been involved in this museum for about 50 years.
I didn't realize that, but I guess that would be.
Pretty much, because 1980,
Yeah,
you came on, so it's not quite 50, but they were over, we had a past in the park, and then over at Quincy Island in about 1980. This immense building, which is now the Quincy Museum, was available.
It was available.
And you guys were just crazy enough to think that you could make this immense mansion work for you, right?
Definitely. Crazy is the word, because that's what some people thought about us. Yeah.
But it's not often that a jewel like this becomes available.
No, and not for what price that we could buy it.
Yeah.
You know.
It was, and it was at one time a dorm for Quincy College.
Quincy College. It had a big history. The nuns were in here. Quincy University, well, Quincy College then, had mainly women here, young girls, students. And I have been over here a lot with them, you know, and staying the night with them and things like that for fun, you know. So I was very used to the building, you know, itself. But it was never really didn't seem to be as bad as it was when we moved in here.
You told me that it was in pretty sorry condition.
It was in very bad condition.
You look at it now, it's beautiful.
Yeah, the ceiling that's up here was falling down, and it had a lot of beautiful, enormous, you know, work done on it, you know, and it had to all be torn out and everything put in new for that, and that's a costly job.
I guess there were layers of paint on some of the woodwork, and that all had to be
Well,
scraped off.
Dr. Snow was he just worked his head off, and what he did was take little knives and little things, and he just worked all that old off of there, and so that none of the original would be ruined, and he did all that beautiful work, mainly over here in the what we call, the sitting room and the library room over there. Those are the two rooms he worked so hard on, and that was absolutely a mess. The woodwork had, you just almost wanted to cry when you looked at what somebody had done to the woodwork. And it wasn't the students, it was the person who was in charge of,
Now, when you all made the move over here, when you elected a board and you decided to go and pursue this, did you have the kind of money it was going to take to bring this thing?
No.
No, we didn't.
We still had $21.47.
$21.
Yeah.
Well, that, even in 1980, that didn't go very far.
1980. Well, any time it doesn't go very far. Even another 20 years earlier, it still wouldn't have been enough to go. But like I said, Bob Mays was quite a guy to go out and try to get money, and he did wonderful. And the Stillwells came forward and gave us, quite a bit. And once people saw that we were really working hard on this and meant what we said, that we were going to make it work and we were going to revise the house and do all of the work on it, then they started to come forward. And then Bob and I got the idea about selling the rooms. So that's where we got a lot of our money. We sold that room, we sold this, well, we sold every room downstairs.
Every room's named after somebody.
Yes, and that meant that they gave money. And we decided how much money would be needed for that room, and that's what we charged.
I see.
So some of them were really expensive and some were that expensive, And so that all moved ahead gradually, that we did that. But it didn't take too long to get the money and get that all going,
Well, it's remarkable now, and don't you love coming in here? It's such a grand building.
Yeah. Oh, it is. And it was worth saving because it definitely, if somebody hadn't taken it over for what they saw in it, it would not have lasted. It would have been like a lot of other beautiful buildings that go down the drain. Yeah. And then we began to get a lot of donations, of various things that were very precious. And the dining room set in there is the original dining room set from the very beginning of the building. The chairs and the table are all, now not the stuff on the table.
Right.
Yeah, but the table and the chairs itself are original from the very first family.
Oh, you're so fortunate.
Isn't that amazing? And look how beautiful they are.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Now, Barbara, this exhibit is not part of your 50th anniversary exhibit, but it ties in because it has part of the history of this building as it pertains to Quincy University.
Absolutely. For about 40 years, this building served as a dormitory for Quincy University, for Quincy College then.
And we're looking at Bill Keller, and he's a local soldier. He saved everything from his service days, didn't he?
He did. We're very fortunate that he saved everything from menus and newspapers and ship's logs and things like that from his entire time during World War II. And so we were able to build an exhibit around his memorabilia.
Now, he grew up in New Canton, Pike County. His family had a business there, but he wanted to be a pilot, didn't he? He wanted to fly.
In the worst way, he wanted to fly. He looked into, by the things that he saved, he had brochures from Navy pilots, Army Air Corps, just about any way that he could fly. I think he was determined to get up in the air.
As we go over here, one of the ways to do that would have been to attend Quincy University because they had what was called what was their training program called? Civilian pilot?
Civilian pilot training program. And it ran during World War II. It was an 8-week program, and the guys came here. They actually dormed here in this building, which was then called Stillwell Hall. They did physical education, and they did ground school. And so Mr. Keller was one of the students that was here for doing his 8-week stint.
And then if we see a picture of, those are his fellow cadets there, I guess, and he's in the back row, second from the right.
He
There
is in the dark
yeah.
in the dark jacket with
And
the
he's out on an
tie.
looks like he's out on an airfield there someplace. But I'll bet a lot of people from Quincy are surprised to know that there was a pilot training program, a military program.
A lot of people are not aware of that. In this case, there's a couple of pictures. They had a T4 trainer, and there's actually a friar standing on the wing of the
There
T4.
sure is. I wonder if he learned to fly too. Fascinating stuff. Well, listen, Barbara, I want to thank you and Avril and Janelle for helping us out doing this. This is a fascinating exhibit, and you'll really know how to celebrate 50 years.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much. Thank you for coming.
And you can see the 50th celebration of the Quincy Museum exhibit until the end of the year. With another Illinois Story in Quincy, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you. For a DVD copy of the program you've just seen, send 1995 to Network Knowledge, P.O. Box 6248, Springfield, Illinois 62708. Be sure to include the program name, subject, and when the program aired. You can also order with your credit card by calling 800-232-3605.